When Chris Christie first knocked around the idea of running for the Republican nomination for president, the conventional wisdom was that he didn't have a lane. Well, now he's got a freeway. The original calculation was that there was room for just one anti-Trump candidate in the race. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has the lead in that lane by a wide margin. But the other day Christie opened up a whole different lane. He took a foreign policy position exactly opposite to the position DeSantis has taken. That policy is called non-interventionist by those who support it and isolationist by those who oppose it. Whatever you call it, DeSantis and the Donald are in broad agreement on it while Christie is fervently opposed to it. In fact, he's so fervently opposed that he violated Godwin's law. Godwin's law is the precept of internet debate stating that the first person to compare his opponent to Hitler is declared the loser and the debate ends. By that standard, Christie lost this debate when he reacted to this DeSantis statement to Fox News on the Russia-Ukraine war. While the U.S. has many vital national interests, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them, DeSantis said. That sent Christie back to the 1930s, fulminating as only he can fulminate. In an interview with AXIOS, Christie said DeSantis sounds like Neville Chamberlain talking about when Germany had designs on Czechoslovakia. I ran that by the only guy I know who has defeated Christie in an election. That's former Morris County Assemblyman Mike Carroll, and the election was a Republican Assembly primary in 1995. What DeSantis actually said was that we need to avoid additional entanglements, Carroll said. I read that as troops. Unless you argue with DeSantis saying we shouldn't send troops, what's your argument? In Christie's case, his argument is the same one he made in his unsuccessful 2016 run for the Republican nomination, that he's the most hawkish guy in the race. In that 2016 campaign, Christie said on a radio show, "Put me in the ring against Vladimir Putin, we'll do just fine. Put me in the ring with Vladimir Putin, knock yourself out, Chris. Not with a president who doesn't even know who's in his corner." In what was billed as Christie's major foreign policy address in that campaign, he spent an hour trying to prove he's tough but proved instead that he didn't even know who's fighting whom in the Mideast. If we don't have a plan to stop Bashar al-Assad in Syria or in Yemen, what's to stop governments lending support to proxy forces like Al-Qaeda and ISIS? He asked. It's hard to put so much ignorance into so few words. Assad wasn't in Yemen. It's 1,000 miles from Yemen to Syria, where Assad was holed up in Damascus, fighting against the same ISIS and Al-Qaeda that Christie purported to oppose. If you don't even know the battle lines, why jump into the battle? I put that question to Doug Bandow, who is a military and foreign policy analyst for the Free Market Cato Institute in Washington. It gives him an argument for a candidacy, Bandow said of our former governor. Before, it was, how do you convince anyone there's a reason for him to run? This gives him an argument for his candidacy. He has a purpose. Furthermore, it's a purpose that attracts a lot of important people in the Republican Party, he said. Christie talks of what some of the congressional Republicans want. That's a presidential candidate who is hawkish, he said. If he's the only one, he will get a lot of the elite support even if he doesn't get a lot of votes. The reason he won't get a lot of votes is that he's got the same problem Mitt Romney had in his 2008 primary run against war hero John McCain. People are skeptical of politicians who propose things that might get their kids killed. In that race, Romney talked tough on military matters but promptly put his foot in his mouth when asked why neither he nor any of his 5 sons served in the military, as 2 of McCain's sons did. One of the ways my sons are showing support for our nation is helping me get elected, said Romney. Carroll had a similar question for Christie. Is he ready to send Americans off to fight and die for Ukraine? How many of Chris's kids serve? Christie has not proposed sending troops. But when it comes to having kids in the military, he has 0 and Carol has 2. Carol, whose wife is of Ukrainian descent, said he's rooting for Ukraine in the war but fully supports DeSantis's position that the U.S. should not provide assistance that could require the deployment of American troops or enable Ukraine to engage in offensive operations beyond its borders. Contrast that with this quote from Christie in what was his first foreign policy speech, way back in 2014, "Who's out there that you will nominate to make sure that justice is done around the world, that lives are protected, and that liberty and freedom is not only protected where it is but is pushed forward in places where people merely dream of it?" I don't know who. But whoever he is, there's a reason his lane won't be crowded.